right, we're back here at the HTD show. Second segment. We're going to be talking about what's going on in Texas right now. We're going to be talking about Ted Cruz and how he thought it was a great idea to take a vacation in the middle of a natural disaster. So, state of Texas, it's having one of the worst snowstorms, natural disasters that they've had in I don't know how long, they say. And in the middle of it, in the middle of people dying, in the middle of, people having problems finding suitable drinking water, pipes bursting in apartments, all kind of craziness and chaos going on in that state. One of their representatives decides, you know what? I don't like it here right now. And decides to go on a trip, take his family on a trip. And then he gets busted. Then he gets busted. And I encourage you to go look at the footage, go Google it, bring up your favorite news source, unless it's Fox, because it'll probably be edited, or Newsmax, or one of those places. If that's what you watch, that's fine. I just encourage you to find other sources of information as well. But he changed his story at least like 2 times, maybe 3, So how does somebody have the galls to do that? You know what I mean? I mean, you're in a national spotlight. This is your state, not anybody else's. This is you, Texas, this is you. And you're like, hell no, it's cold in here, I'm out. And like that wasn't gonna be a problem. Like nobody was gonna take issue with that. Even though people went without power, electricity for like a week, They can't, they can't find suitable drinking water, and you're like off to a resort. How do you feel about that?
I think you feel like most people feel right now. Disgusted, I would probably start with that. But it's just a really sad situation, just like it's sad on top of sad, right? One thing I want to note is that we're still in a pandemic. There's still a virus out there that is causing pain and suffering to families all across the nation. And then we have this massive storm recently that has impacted many states, but Texas in particular was hit in a way that they were just completely unprepared for. And some of our major cities have been really struggling, just like you said. No water, no heat, no electricity, and really no access to resources. Pipes are frozen over, and we just learned, and many of us did not know, that Texas has this whole electric grid line that is completely different from the rest of the United States, because they wanted to avoid federal regulation, and then learning how it had not been kept up to deal with situations like this. This also goes into environmental issues and how we keep saying, we are not impacting the environment, but our weather systems have been getting stronger and stronger and more harsh throughout the years, the cold and the global warming. And so this is another impact of that. And there's a lot of things there. And so Ted Cruz is just, for those who don't appreciate his politics or his position on anything, really, are just going to be like, what do you expect? What do you expect with someone like this? They're going to say what they need to say to please their base or to please themselves, whatever's going to make their position better. But at the end of the day, it just kind of shows a bit of his true character. Sure, you had a vacation plan. Sure, it was a plan for your family. Maybe you are telling the truth that I was just escorting my daughter and her friends over, and I was going to be right back. If that was the case, why not even address that before you take off?
From the right there. No. That like I said, a lot of stuff came out. He got busted on that. It was found out that the plane ticket originally was set to return on Saturday. He returned the next day because of the backlash. So he can't even say that I was going to drop them off, because he wasn't supposed to even be back for another 2 days. So that blew that out the wall.
My understanding was it was already a pre-vacation set up, and they were like, "Well, it's there. We gotta take it. Let's take it." You know.
Wasn't even then. Congress took a break, and in that time, she was like, his wife, text some of their friends. My house is freezing. Why don't we get away to Mexico? Let's go take a trip. And it was spur of the moment. This was not pre-planned. That's what makes it even more worse.
Well, that also goes to show of how quickly information changes and what information is given to the media. But I'm also very wary of what is it that we are given, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't have as many strong opinions around Ted Cruz in this situation because I don't have high aspirations for him and his work around the truth of like taking care of his people. I mean, these are examples when you have people that are literally are freezing to death, are starving in ways that they just were clearly unprepared for. I mean, I'm seeing videos like on TikTok of people with water and snow coming into their homes.
Right.
It's just something that it's a natural disaster, but it's clearly a huge impact. And so what this really is a time to see who's about what, right? Who's actually doing this stuff. At the same time that he's taking a cruise, we're also here, taking a trip to Cancun. Was it Cancun? Is that where he's going?
Yes, Cancun.
All right. Well, yeah, Cancun. I was gonna say Cabo. Either way, one of the C ones. Ironically, going to Mexico of all places. That's right. Another topic on him and immigration. But it's also at the same time we're looking at people that like arch enemies in the Senate. Ocasio raising 1 million in the first day, 2 million. Last I checked, she raised up to 3 million and is going to go visit Texas and help his people out when her state is in New York.
She's a representative from the state of New York.
New York, yeah.
Right.
And a Democrat and a progressive one at that.
Right.
But
since we brought up the parties, let me back up. Let me tell you what I found out about this, which can't be said enough. And you're going to hear it here, and hopefully you hear it on a lot more stations, a lot more news outlets report this. But okay, so basically, I'm gonna update you as well. The state of Texas is a Republican state, has been for like the last 20 years. That's no surprise to anybody. But what they have done in that time, they have deregulated a lot of things as far as their electrical and their utilities and all this stuff, where they get their power from, all this good stuff. They did a lot of that deregulation. And then what they did was they took the government suggestions. Since they deregulated, what the government said to them on the way they should do things were just suggestions. They weren't, mandated. And so since they weren't mandated, what do companies do? They save money. They don't do the extra. They don't do the extra. And what I found out since then, and this goes back since from '89, I think there was like two or three big examples that I heard of, but they showed examples of where weather had put them in a bind and they had the opportunity, to make changes, and they didn't. And they just kept pushing it aside. And now when something happens, they have like, I think it was 12% of their energy coming from wind turbines. They tried to say 25, and I think in reality, it turned out to be like 12% or something like that. Whatever the case, 25, 12, that's still a small percentage when you think of the big picture, right? And most of their energy came from fossil fuels, gas, oil, and all that, right? Well, turns out those were the things that froze, those pipes. Yes, the wind turbines, they did too, but they only accounted for a small bit of that energy. The big bulk of that energy came from fossil fuels, which those pipes froze. And that was, the main reason for all of this. But when they went on TV, first thing they started doing was talking about, like you said, their arch enemy, a Democrat, AOC, and her new Green Deal, and blah, blah, this and that. And she has nothing to do with the state of Texas. Why are we talking about her? And, that's what I'm thinking. I'm watching this, and like all of a sudden you try to shift the blame from your mistake to somebody who doesn't even live in your state on a policy that hasn't even been implemented yet. You know what I mean? And then on top of that,
What's new?
The kicker in all of this is bad enough that they were trying to switch the blame or like say, oh, look over here. You know, what made it even worse is the simple fact that Ted Cruz, the governor, I believe, of Texas as well, took an enormous amount of money from these fossil fuel people. Ted Cruz was, I think he's like near 4 million that they've invested in this guy. So, and then the governor, it was like 150 million or something like that. I mean, like, so these people, you know, they actually bought their politicians. It's no wonder that, you know, the state was, all these regulations, you know, fell by the wayside, you know, and then something happens and then all of a sudden we need somebody to blame.
You're not telling me anything new. You're not telling me anything new. This is the way it's been going on. I mean, you know, how can we ignore?
They have their own thing though. You know what I mean? They decided to do their own thing. And that's why.
What I'm saying is not true is how politics works, how politics has been working. You know, when I'm being caught or the heat's on me, how do I then deflect that somewhere else? How do I then bring up something else? How can I pull something out of my pocket to blame something that isn't what you're thinking should be blamed? You know, and then also you're just going to switch words because we forget. One, most of us don't follow politics like we're following a football game. Now, if most of us follow politics like we follow the football game, then, you know, this be a whole different country. Because one, I think, and I brought this up again last time we spoke around the insurrection, was around education. I'm going to bring this up again. We are not a very educated population. This is not to state that some people are. I'm not trying to say that we're a dumb country, first of all. So, like, please don't take offense if you're taking offense to what I'm saying. But in reality, though, we are not a country that is educated or interested in how we run and how we govern and how we hold our people accountable. We're just not. And so it's interesting for me, like when I think about, I happen to have been in a family that was like, hey, the minute you turn 18, I was stuck in a car and we were dragged and went to go vote. Like voting was something that I was told was something that was necessary. But it wasn't just that. It was like, who are we voting for? What are we voting about? And how do we hold these people accountable? To the point that I was even interested in politics for a time myself, for a very, very small time. But because I knew that these were ways that shit was getting done, excuse my language. But people may say, oh, politics doesn't, you know, impact me, or I don't care, they're all frauds or whatever. At the end of the day, yes, in some way, a lot of them are frauds, but a lot of them are in a position of power that makes impacts on our everyday lives. And so our water, our electricity, our gas, our systems, our infrastructures are connected to the politicians and connected to the people that have access to power and money to make sure that we are safe as a country, that we have the right things to make sure that when a huge storm comes in, our stuff doesn't freeze over. And if it does freeze over, that we have a clear system of how we help our community. But these are just signs of the flaws in our system, because as you pointed out, you know, they're bought out by the big money, right? And so if, you know, all this money that's coming from one industry is saying, hey, we're just gonna, you know, help your campaign, give you this, and just, you know, don't worry about like having us regulate and update our infrastructure. It's all good here. You know, it's like, what's a little rain in Texas? It just isn't the case. But I think I'm just overall frustrated. It's like, again, I want to be hopeful, and yet I'm still frustrated. At the same time, the hopeful piece of it is that I find that one good thing that ex-President Trump had provided in these 4 years was energy around interest in what the F is going on with our government and our system. Like truly people actively saying, what the F is this? People actively stepping up and taking over people's positions, people holding others accountable, people saying, no, that law isn't just. And I saw more and more of that that took place during this last administration than ever before in my short lifetime. And I think that's one thing to think about when we go all the way back to someone like Senator Ted Cruz taking his little getaway and then being like, oh, why did he come back? The positive is why he comes back to look at it, is that people were up on his ass saying, what the F are you doing, man? You're making Republicans, you're making us look bad. Democrats, Texans that all hold guns. Shoot, I'm surprised his life isn't at threat. Be like, oh, okay, let me get this straight. Like, you know, my gun still works even if I don't have power. Like, how are you just going to take off on us? Like, people holding him accountable is the reason he came back. And that is actually how our system needs to work. And now it's like, what is he doing once he gets back?
Well, I'm just going to say that you brought up something that is a big point. You alluded to, well, when you were talking about us not being, or people, us not being smart, or not being smart, but not being, I would put it in terms of, I wouldn't say we're not educated or not being smart. I would say we're not invested in the political system as much as we should be. And I think it was set up that way. You know, I think you have people, their whole thing is to confuse and you know, dishearten people to the point to where they don't care about politics. Because if they could get you not to care, then they can do whatever they want. And that's exactly what happens. You know, they got enough people saying, oh, well, they're all lying anyway. I can't believe anything they're saying. You know, and then they tune out, and then you get some kind of funky law. You're like, how did this happen? Well, you tuned out. That's how that happened. But
how did that happen?
Yes. Well, with that being said, thanks for coming today. You know, it's always a pleasure. And we'll see you guys next time on the HTD show, Hot Topic Discussion, A&R Pro Media. Until next time, thanks for coming by.
Got it.